How in the do you have a conservative sociology professor? Well, class, there's nothing wrong with society, except we don't pray in schools and a bunch of rich comedians can't say the R word. Class dismissed.
On Trial with Josh Lowry.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of On Trial with Josh Lowry here on Landis Media, where we take one issue at a time and we put that issue on trial. Today, we are going to talk about the Republicans' attacks on higher education. Now, look, higher education is the foundation of American innovation. That's how we get the capability for people to work skilled jobs. These jobs contribute so much to our economy. And it's not just the jobs that they create, right? Education institutions, they contribute research, development. I mean, we're talking about advancements in quality of life, improving health outcomes, giving us tools to fight disease. I mean, countless other advancements in technology and science. And let's not forget about the jobs that are not just created because people go to college, but the schools themselves. Look, institutions of higher education are economic engines of entire cities. So why exactly are Republicans waging a war on higher education? Well, today, that's what we're going to put on trial. The Republicans' war on higher education. Let's start with a war that's being waged right here in Indiana. Now, in Indiana, we have a part-time legislature. Got to make some adjustments to my camera. 1 second. Sorry, my dogs hit the thing. That's what happens when you film at home, people. Look, so here in Indiana, we have a part-time legislature. They go 3 to 4 months, right? And we call that our session. So they do all their work and then session ends. And that's it for making the laws for that year, unless they call a special session. So this year, the final day for session, Republicans jammed in an amendment to Indiana law. This law, Indiana Code Section 21-18-9-10.5, you better memorize that. There's going to be a test. This amendment gets rid of hundreds of college programs in Indiana. How? So here's what the law says. We have what's called the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. I'm just going to call it the commission because it's the only commission I'm talking about. Not talking about the commission that Biggie asks for permission to hit him. Never mind. Not going to go down that road. Look, so Indiana Higher Commission for Higher Education. A college has to have enough graduates to meet a certain statutory minimum. So you have to have so many graduates every 3 years, I guess is the exact thing. And if you don't have enough graduates, then you can go to the commission and you have to get approval. But if the commission doesn't approve it, program is gone. Now look, there's a couple of problems, but let's just start with the obvious one for as far as passing a bill. Here, everybody, you get to see our weekly appearance of the star of this podcast, Ollie the dog. Say hi, Ollie. All right, so look, there's clearly a problem with this law because it wasn't publicly debated, right? Like you hear all the time about how there's debates. That didn't happen. This wasn't something people were clamoring for. Literally the day before session ends, boom, they stick it right in the bill. So clearly the Republicans were trying to hide something. Now, what's the actual effect of this bill going to be? Let's look at an actual real world example. Let's look at Indiana University, my alma mater, the largest university in Indiana and the home of the Hoosiers, Little 500. If you've never seen the movie Breaking Away, go watch it. You actually see the house that I grew up in the background when he's riding down the highway. That was basically the coolest thing when you growing up out in a rural area and you see your house in the back of a scene in a movie that you rented the VHS in the bargain bin. Pretty exciting moment in your life. So anyways, what's this bill going to do to IU? It's going to get rid of a lot of programs. Most of them, it's going to be in programs for humanities and languages. Now, this is particularly damaging for Indiana University. 2020 to 2022, IU Bloomington gave out more humanities doctorates than any other university in the country. It also ranks first for number of languages taught for now. So interesting. Why would the Republicans, who are supposed to want to benefit Indiana, take away what is a strength for Indiana University? Well, we'll get to that in a second. What other programs are hurt? These seem pretty targeted. Jewish studies, classical studies, and here's some odd ones. some STEM programs. That's been like the whole push. Like we all seem to accept that we need more STEM students, more STEM employees, workers, development, like STEM. It can only be more. And they may have to get rid of classes in artificial intelligence, microbiology, and cyber operations and warfare. What more could you need that's like particularly targeted for the problems we're facing at this time? And this law looks to cut those exact programs. But that's just Indiana University. What about statewide here in Indiana? 6 universities have already voluntarily identified 408 programs are going to have to be cut. Here's the thing. IndyStar did an analysis. I'll put the link in the notes. Also, along with there's a WFYI article on this whole law in general. But there's going to be a lot more that have to be cut, including a soil science program at Purdue that is world renowned. So, like, what is the reasoning? Well, we'll talk about the reasons that the Republicans have given to validate their war on higher education here in just a second. But when we're talking about this specific law, basically what they're saying is we're going to take away the option for someone to study something if we don't believe it gives you enough benefit in the workforce. Mike Braun, his exact quote was, "This will help students make more informed decisions about the degree they want to pursue and ensure that there is a direct connection between the skills students are gaining through higher education and the skills they need most." So apparently, the only thing that college is supposed to do, according to Mike Braun, is prepare you for the job you're going to spend the rest of your life in. Well, we'll get back to that. Chris Lowry, who's the head of the commission, who, although he shares my name, I don't think we share the same values. And also, he puts an E in Lowry. That's poser behavior, okay? There shouldn't be an E in Lowry. He said, "Our institutions want to ensure the programs they're offering are responsive to student demand and fit the needs of Indiana's evolving economy. We're going to get back to that too. But here we go, back again. It's all about work to them. The primary beneficiaries of this work will be students who face an overwhelming number of degree programs as they make their educational and career decisions." First off, something I don't ever hear them talking about is it's something like more than 50% of people don't end up working in the exact degree that they went to undergrad for, even though financially they will make drastically more money over the term of their career, even if it's not the same career. Like, there's benefits to college. They can deny it all they want. And they do deny it all they want. Because, like, it's not just this law. Nothing exists in a vacuum. We have to think about all the other shit Republicans are doing to attack higher education. Let's go through a few examples. Mike Braun, our governor here in Indiana, just replaced the board of trustees at Indiana University with a bunch of right-wing extremists and conspiracy theorists. The Trump administration has cut billions of funding to universities and research, which, if you followed the news, it's bad. There's some research on, diabetes, cancer stuff that would have made people's lives better that have been cut. The State Department is limiting foreign students that can come in and go to college. And another one is both at the state level and the Trump administration. They're trying to push requirements to have intellectual diversity. What they mean is they want more conservative professors at college. Side note, I don't know that works for everything. Like, how in the fuck do you have a conservative sociology professor? What is the class just like, well, class, there's nothing wrong with society, except we don't pray in schools and a bunch of rich comedians can't say the R word. Class dismissed. They don't believe in society, so how are you going to teach sociology? Look, never mind, I digress. The point is there's a full-on assault on higher education by Republicans. Now, my guest on today's episode is Dean Kalea Benner. She is the dean of Indiana University's School of Social Work, and you'll hear we really dive into the problems that these attacks are causing. How are colleges dealing with them? How is it affecting their ability to teach students, retain professors, so on and so forth? Now, Dean Benner is a very professional person. At no point does she say these attacks are unfair, stop. She talks about the fact that colleges should be held accountable, that they should be transparent, and they should improve. But these attacks aren't fixing any of those problems or improvements that need to be made, because all these problems that the Republicans are attacking are made up, originating in Fox News, like literally out of the middle of nowhere, podcast theories, and all of a sudden they think that something needs to be changed in college. And so when somebody that's grounded in the real world, like Dean Benner has to deal with these issues, she has to do what she's dealt with or work with what she's dealt with, right? And she can't really speak to the political reasons behind this because she is a college employee. She's an employee of the state. She's the dean of students, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. She's too professional. She can't come on my podcast and just flame Mike Braun. Me, on the other hand, like Johnny Storm says, flame on. See, let's talk about those reasons. Why the Republicans are saying that they're having these full-on attacks on colleges. And they really could be lumped into two reasons, and both of them are horseshit. Number one, I kind of already hinted at this, it's workforce development. Governor Braun and all these Republicans talk as though higher education and workforce development are in opposition of each other. They're two different things fighting out. That isn't really true. I'm going to say something that's going to shock someone. You can go to college and have a good career afterwards. You can not go to college and still have a good career afterwards. Two things can be true. Now, look, statistically, the odds are you're going to make more money if you do go to college. Actually, really any post-high school degree, whether it's a trade school, college, whatever, right? The economist Michael Hicks here in Indiana has written a lot about this, and he really says the thing that states need to be focused on is educational attainment. He talks about, right? Like, even when you adjust for inflation, the one group that continually seems to grow their wages are people that have gone to college. So if Republicans were actually trying to help people in the workforce, they were trying to make it more affordable for kids to go to college, not just attacking colleges. And that's just from the actual workforce part. There's another part about this too. Like, college isn't just about the effects on the workforce. Look, for me, I took a sociology class in college that opened my eyes, right? I'm a kid from Martinsville. I've never been exposed to hardly anything different. I took a sociology class and just learned so much about what was going on in the world. And I guarantee you, if I had not had that sociology class, I would have not ended up becoming a foster parent. I didn't think about the inequalities in the world. And I remember when I really learned about the inequalities that happen when a kid has been in the foster system, I would have never been receptive to the idea of being a foster parent if I had not had that class of sociology. Is that somehow a bad thing? Is that somehow something we need to remove from college? I mean, the way Mike Braun talks about college, it's like he just thinks you're a robot. And the whole point of going to college is just to get downloaded with the new software, right? Just so that you become an employable robot that he needs. Now, of course, he needs that. He thinks the sole purpose of the government is to benefit big corporations. That's how he got rich himself. And just look at the way he runs the government. We can't spend money to give people health care, but we can spend money to give huge corporations subsidies. We can't teach someone empathy, but we can teach them how to go work for Braun's biggest donors. He's imparting his personal view on what college should be. Never mind the fact he went to Harvard, and it turned out pretty well for him, don't you think? Lastly, when it comes to workforce development, this is another reason that, like, the whole Republican thing is horse shit. You don't have to hurt one thing to support another. Like, some people aren't going to go to college. It's fine. And we should still do everything we can to make sure that there are great, like, sustainable jobs for people that don't go to college. But you don't have to attack colleges to support people that don't go to colleges. One person's success doesn't have to be another person's failure. Let's get on to point two. The second reason Republicans say they're attacking colleges. Now, I know they don't actually say they're attacking college, but, like, they're attacking college, okay? It's the reason that they're giving to justify these attacks. And it's because the Republicans claim that colleges are pushing an agenda. Now, of course, this one is bullshit. It's, to them, an agenda is like anything that's not Republican, right? Like, this is not shocking. Science departments are pro-science. But here's the thing. Being for science isn't a viewpoint. It's just science. Just like being against science isn't actually a viewpoint. You're just wrong. Something's researched and is proven, that's a fact. Just because you disagree doesn't make it a debate. That was like when people were like, oh, the debate over masks. What debate? No, you just didn't want to wear one. When you wear a mask, it was less likely that COVID would be spread. That's a fact. Just because you didn't want to wear one does not then make it a debate. But also, like, this whole idea of pushing an agenda, we could talk about sociology, like I mentioned earlier. Like, think about this. Between sociology, psychology, one of the things that was developed was social emotional learning. And Republicans say, oh, that's political. No, it's not. Social emotional learning was a research-based educational program that was developed to help kids academically. Social and emotional learning doesn't say shit about Democrats or about Republicans. It's about helping that individual kid. It only became partisan because Republicans politicized giving a shit about other people. Think of how absurd that is. If you say the word empathy, a Republican immediately thinks you're being a liberal. The word empathy is defined as the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. That's about as anti-Republican Party as you can be. The absence of empathy is the defining characteristic of the Republican Party. I mean, listen to them. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Mike Braun, Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith, right here in Westfield, our own mayor, Scott Willis. They don't ever talk about helping other people. They only talk about who they hate, who they want to hurt, what they can take from someone, and what someone else is doing wrong. There's no empathy. In fact, the only thing that they want that's good is what's good just for them, even if it doesn't actually affect them. You think a single one of those guys has any close friend or relative in the trans community or is harmed by anyone in the trans community? No, but they still want laws passed that hurt the trans community because that makes them feel good, because they didn't get social and emotional learning. They don't have the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. They lack empathy. So of course, a politician that lacks empathy is going to think that the teaching of empathy is political. They took something that is literally an ability to understand someone else's feelings and somehow made that political. They reverse engineered it. So when they say that they are taking on colleges because colleges are pushing an agenda, they've decided that they're against dissects. I mean, guys, like, just because a right-wing podcaster or a right-wing politician suddenly decides they're against something doesn't make it a partisan issue. Like, a fact is a fact. Science is science. Research is research. But the Republican Party has decided they're against fact, science, and research. So, according to the Republican Party, fact, science, and research are partisan. And guess what colleges teach a lot of? So, since colleges teach fact, science, and research, Republicans have now created in their head the idea that this is an agenda that's pushed by liberals in the Democratic Party. So those are the two reasons that Republicans give for their attack on college. And we're going to dig into those reasons a little bit with Dean Benner, more the absence of them and how they're going to deal with them. So you guys probably figured, well, Josh, you said those two reasons are bullshit. So you probably think Republicans have an actual reason they want to attack colleges. Yep, I do. And they're the two ones that always end up mattering to the Republican Party. And it's always power and money, money and power. It's like the Locks song, but without a good catchy beat or memorable phrase. It's just money and power. So reason one, power. Republicans think that college is making people to be Democratic voters, and Republicans want to keep their power. So they don't want Democratic voters. They want Republican voters. Now see, this whole like anti-education current, that was always kind of a part of the Republican Party, but it was pushed away because guess what? Most college educated voters used to vote Republican. So Republicans may have not liked what was being taught at college, but they were okay with it because somehow it was turning out Republicans. That's changed under Trump. Now, damn near 60% of voters with a college degree vote Democrat. I don't think that's hard to figure out why. I just said if you go to college and you learn facts, science, research, and one party is against facts, science, and research, it's going to be hard to vote for that person. Also, like, some of what happens is you just experience different things, right? I don't know how it was for anybody that went to college, but for me, that was the first time I made friends from many different groups. First time I've ever met a Jewish person, became good friends, roommates still to this day. I could tell you growing up, I'd never met a Jewish person. Well, I'm sure I did. I wasn't aware of it. It wasn't something that we talked. You get your eyes opened a lot when you go to college. And it's not just this like idea of indoctrination. It's the idea that you meet people that are different from you, different lifestyles, different cultures, different backgrounds, different everything. And it makes you realize there's more than the bubble you've lived in. And that's like the main thing, the Republican Party right now. They want to confine everything to their bubble. Only the way that they live is correct. And so when you learn about other people, you develop empathy. You start caring about what happens to other people. Well, under the Trump Republican Party, that doesn't fit. So it follows that most people that get a college degree now vote Democrat. Now, of course, Republicans don't say, well, what are we doing wrong? What can we do to get their vote? Nope, they gotta do their normal, oh, well, something's wrong with college, and that's why they're voting this way. So they're going to attack what they think is making people vote Democrat. Said it's all about money and power. This is the power part. Republicans want to stay in power, and if they think that people going to college is going to make more Democratic voters and cost Republicans power, then they're going to attack the colleges. So I said it's all about money and power, so what about the money part? That's the second reason Republicans are actually waging war on colleges. Look, this is no secret. Republicans want to give more money to the rich. Always have, always will, tell as old as time. Republicans know college can be good for your career, because all these politicians that are talking shit about college are sending their kids to college. But they also know that all these attacks aren't actually getting rid of college. They're not getting rid of the business degrees that they want their kids to go get. They're not getting rid of the law school courses. They're not getting rid of whatever that the Republicans want. And what the Republicans are doing isn't going to get rid of college for their kids, and it's not going to get rid of college for the kids of wealthy families. There will always be education available for those with money. And if Republicans can make it harder to go to college, make people with more diverse beliefs and views not want to go to college, can cut funding from low-income students, guess who's only going to get to go to college? The rich. The rich get richer, and the Republicans achieve their goal. No matter what Trump said when he ran for office, what did he do when he got in office? They cut taxes for the rich. Look, Republicans are obsessed with wealth. Republicans are obsessed with wealth. Why do you think they love every billionaire except George Soros? Because they want the Gilded Ages back. They want the Great Gatsby. They don't think wealth inequality is bad. They want their buddies to get huge handouts, and they know that those buddies in return are going to help their kids go to college, and their buddies' kids are going to go to college. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Every time the Republicans are in power, it happens. Taxes, cuts to entitlements. The attack on college is just another way. Look at what they're doing right now. They're getting rid of Medicaid. They're cutting taxes for the rich. Trump is doing tariffs, which hurts the average person way more than rich people. Getting rid of subsidies for people that might want to buy an electric vehicle, but giving subsidies to rich corporations that want to burn more coal. And let's not forget the amount of free advertising the Republicans are giving to crypto while they're making the money off of it. I mean, it's kind of an easy one. It's probably so easy that I think I even overlook it sometimes. When Republicans get into power, they make sure the rich get richer, and their attacks on college are just another way to do that. So, what's the closing verdict? Republicans say that they want to fix college. I think that's the way they would put it, because we need more workforce development, and they're pushing an agenda at college is what they would say. But what is the actual reason? The same reason behind every Republican policy for the last 50 years: money and power. They want the rich to have more money, and the Republicans want to stay in power. So they keep waging war on higher education. Remember that. Remember that's why it's actually happening. And when you keep those two things in mind, you're going to see it over and over in these statements that the Republicans make, in their actions. You can always tie it back to money and power with the Republicans. Never improving someone else's life, but always giving them more power. Never improving someone else's life unless you're wealthy and keeping more money. So there you have it. That's why the Republicans are actually waging war on higher education. Now, up next is my interview with Dean Kalea Benner. All right, everyone. We have a special guest today, Dean Kalea Benner of Indiana University School of Social Work. I use, of course, my alma mater, so I'm very happy to have you on here, Dean Benner.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So my first question, obviously, social work is meant to help other people, right?
Absolutely.
With all the laws that just were passed through Indiana, is helping other people still legal?
So absolutely it is, and it's needed now more than ever. We are seeing some pretty high rates of need across our state, our nation, the globe. So now more than ever, social work is needed. But moreover, I think that if you just look at, for instance, the behavioral health crisis, every single county in the state, all 92 counties, have a workforce shortage for behavioral health workers. Our school is positioned across 90 of those 92 counties, so we're uniquely positioned to help Hoosiers improve their well-being and their quality of life.
Did you say all 92 counties have a shortage?
Behavioral health workforce shortage. Yes, I did.
Good Lord. Is that a national issue, or is that very specific to Indiana?
It is a national issue, actually, particularly in more rural communities. But across Indiana, we're seeing the shortages even in our more urban communities as well.
Really? Okay, we're gonna have to take a side route here. So what is so look, I myself used therapy many times. I'm a foster parent, so I've worked with many people who've been through social work training, and I think they're all worth their weight in gold.
Thank you.
So what is it that is contributing to this shortage of workers?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things. And one is that we're retiring social workers faster than we're producing them. And so that is an aspect that's part of our population, right? That reflects our demographics.
Right.
But another aspect is that there's just some barriers, I think, right now that we're trying to address across the state, but are similar across other states too. It's not unique to Indiana, but certainly our focus is on Indiana. For instance, one of the things that we know the Bowen Center report came out last year around this time, and it reported that 54% of youth and young adults who have a depression diagnosis don't get treatment. That's not right. That's not okay. We can do something about that, and we should do something about that.
54%?
For the majority.
Wow.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you have any idea, like, how much of that is, I guess, maybe an unwillingness to get help versus there's not help there when they want to get it?
I think that it's a combination of things. First of all, the stigma against mental health treatment remains. And even as you were very, very much embraced the need and the support that mental health treatment can bring, some people still feel that I should be able to figure this out. This is mine to take care of. And so there's still a stigma, yes. But secondly, it's also so I finally decided I'm going to get help. All right, I'm making the phone call. It's happening. I'm going online. I'm signing up, whatever it is. And when there's a scarcity of providers, then that means that there's a delay in accessing care. So let's say I go on and I can get in. It's kind of like if you were to schedule a dermatology appointment for just a skin check. You're a month out, right? And so when you see that, sometimes it loses the urgency because it takes a while. Sometimes it exacerbates the very reasons why you're needing to seek help to begin with. So trying to have some more short-term resources in place as people are waiting for those more long-term answers is critical as well.
How does this show up? So I'll tell you, I hear a lot about, and maybe it's just the age of my kids, right? But a lot about, help for students specifically in schools and what's available. And I think a lot of our listeners have kids or at least care about kids, right? How is that impacting schools and our students?
I think that's a great question. Tell me the age of your kids.
Oh, God, what do I not have? 10, 13, 15, 17, and 18.
Yeah, that's amazing. So schools are very much impacted because they're seeing these behaviors come out for kids who are really needing some additional resources that schools just aren't equipped to provide. But we do have school social workers here in Indiana and in most states as well, and there's a certification process for those school social workers. Employing social workers at school to help address those behavioral health needs helps academic outcomes. We have data on that. It helps them be more successful. It helps with the peers and the relational, but it also helps with the discipline aspects as well. So it helps ensure resources in schools are going where they need to be going, to educating students rather than dealing with behavioral issues, right? So that's a huge bonus, but it also, school social workers allow social workers to be in place so parents don't have to take off work to get their kid in to a therapist or a counselor, right? It allows the services to be provided in a school day, so then you don't have to have an additional demand on parents, which also helps destigmatize some of that as well.
Yeah, I want to, like, when you talk about needing to have it in school because parents may not be able to do it otherwise because their work schedule. My wife and I mean, she basically had to create a side business and start working from home so that she would be able to get all our kids just to all their appointments. And I have a pretty flexible career, and I don't know how, if someone has a 9-to-5, you got to be their job. I mean, that takes so many things off the table, including the exact type of help that their kids may need.
And I love that y'all are foster parents. There's such a need. A lot of kids are just looking for stability, and a lot of families are, maybe not aware of the need of those kids who are looking for permanency and stability. So, but to your point, how do you make sure that you manage other people's needs at the same time you still have to work? You still have to have an income, or you're not able to do the things you need to do to take care of your family. So placing social workers in school and having those mental health resources available is really critical to be able to address needs for all children, and not just the ones whose parents can take off work or who are able to live in a community where there's more providers and availability of resources.
And my guess is that the families that are not able to have that extra flexibility and things are usually on the lower scale of the income bracket. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like by not providing this kind of access in schools, we're kind of perpetuating issues that are going to possibly keep somebody down on the lower income bracket because they weren't able to get the help they needed when they were a kid.
Well, I think you're looking at exacerbating or compounding situations. So I would agree with you that social workers can make that difference. But whenever we think about people from lower income or children who've experienced trauma or families who have had instability, all the reasons that a social worker might be helpful, there are also educational impacts associated with all of those things. So you're really looking at those compounded aspects that will impact a child's ability to be successful long beyond third grade.
Yeah, and I know you could speak to this, but I think, and I've mentioned this on previous episodes to our listeners, we cannot overstate the impact of especially trauma, but things that happen to children and the impact it has on them the rest of their lives. I used to, for work, have to go meet with people that were in prison long term, and almost every single one of them that had been convicted of a violent crime had been a victim of a violent lifestyle growing up.
Yeah, you're right. There's definitely relationships there, which we can intervene and we can impact, but only if there's resources available and or knowledge and awareness to be able to do so. A lot of people, unfortunately, perpetuate or continue that cycle because they simply haven't found other alternatives to it. But there are. We just need to make sure they're available.
So actually, the resources, you brought me back on topic. You do a better job of this than I do. Obviously, if someone wants to be a social worker, they have to be trained for it, right? This isn't something we could just plug and play. And when we have a shortage of social workers, that would seem to me that we should then put an emphasis on recruiting more people to go to college for social work. Is that what you're seeing out of the state policies?
Well, I think the state policies have had a number of impacts. One of those state policies is a greater focus maybe on what's happening for financial accountability within higher education. Another one of those impacts is really on curriculum. We continue to be able to remain able to put forth a curriculum that reflects our accreditation body. That's incredibly important for us because social work is a licensed profession. And in order to have a license, you need to be graduated from an accredited program. So some of the state emphasis has allowed us to then point and say, these are important aspects of social work. Others, though, have maybe made it harder to access resources in communities that are just really desperately in need.
So the changes that you mentioned through the policy, I think I'm able to be, these are my words, not Dean Benner. There's a lot of politics in play there, like politicians trying to score political points more so than trying to improve the education system is how I see it from my view. But from what you're seeing, I think one of the underlying arguments that you'll hear from Mike Braun himself, right, is that it's almost like they're trying to suggest that there's less value to college than there was before. Do you believe college is still worth it?
I think that's a great question. Absolutely, unequivocally, I would say yes. And I came from a background where college was seen as really the door to the middle class. And I think that still remains true. Employment stability, employment opportunities, those remain much stronger, a college degree. Is a college degree necessary to be successful? Absolutely not. But does a college degree afford you more opportunities than not having one? Yes, definitely, for sure. Right now in our state, we have about 30% of Hoosiers have a college degree, whether that's a bachelor or a master's or beyond. So about 30% of our state, but yet nationwide, about 42% of jobs require a college degree. And so we're not producing enough in a pipeline to support the number of jobs that are requiring a college degree. I'm fortunate that in social work, I have a direct path. There's a career for anybody who starts a social work degree and finishes it. That career might be with kids, like what we've been talking about. It might be with the aging. It might be with first responders. It might be in a library setting to supporting families and children in that community. It might be in schools. So there's a number of places and ways that social work is relevant and important across populations and communities. But in terms of a college degree as a whole, to your point, there is adversity now that we're facing that I've not seen before. I've been in higher education for a little bit, and it does feel more adversarial. I think the point of the emphasis is that we need to be educating people to be prepared for careers in which they will have a long and lasting stability in. Whenever we think about what those careers might be, we know that the college education opens more doors for. I think that some people want to say it's this or it's that. Education is around. We have a number of students who are returning learners who didn't, maybe coming out of high school wasn't what they wanted to do, or maybe they tried it and wasn't sure and stopped out for a little bit. But welcoming them back, or welcoming those existing professionals or career people who are wanting to come in and change their career, I think is a vital and important part of post-secondary education too, because that's where you see career changes happen. Our longevity, our retirement age, for me, it's 67. I don't know what it is for you on the board, 72 for people born in the 70s. So we got a ways to work, right? And if you got decades of your life to work, hopefully it's doing something meaningful. Hopefully it's contributing to society, and hopefully it's improving the health and well-being of other people. What we know is that a college degree positions people better for those career changes later in life too, if that's something that's needed.
So what's interesting is you were just talking about the career benefits to a college degree, but a lot of the current, when you hear like Governor Braun talking about college, he then talks about workforce development as though those two things are opposed to each other.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't see it that way. But do you?
No, not at all. In fact, we just talked about the national average in terms of positions or jobs that are available that will require a college degree. A lot of times that's not even specifically related to the job, but it's more about being able to set goals. It's more about being able to be successful in setting those goals. It's about the perseverance and determination that's shown. That being said, today I think that sometimes people think, well, I have a degree, so I shouldn't have to start on the night shift, right? I have a degree. But yeah, you still got to start on the night shift because that's a position that's open, right? Mm. Or maybe I shouldn't have to start in this position because I really want that position. Well, you're right. You want to be a supervisor, and maybe at some point you'll be a great supervisor. But learn to be a good supervisor, sometimes you got to be that frontline person who knows the job and then moves into supervision. So I think that there's been a little bit of an approach to a college degree that it's a magic ticket. And what and what I know is that there's still a lot of hard work for any career. But certainly workforce development is part of post-secondary education. It's not the only way to have workforce development, but it's a huge component.
We talk a lot about, at least I do, and I think a lot of the conversation is about the way that politicians view college, or the way that people that don't go to college view college. But what about the kids that are coming into college? Are you starting to see that this kind of combativeness by politicians towards education, is that affecting the way that some of the students are seeing college when they come into college?
I think that's a good question. And you just said you have an 18-year-old, so you probably have had these very conversations with them and maybe some of their friends too. I have somebody who just graduated from high school in 2024 is my youngest. And we have had those conversations. So me and higher education have had that conversation with my son about the value, about the need, about the options that it can bring. I think one of the hard things about trying to make those decisions for folks is we act as if this is the developmental piece of what you have to do next. And the reality of it is there's a lot of people who don't do that in that time frame that we think of. Just last night, these are the best years of my life, but they don't feel like it. Yeah, that's because you're having to work hard, right? And people are. So we have this illusion that this is going to open all these doors and it's going to be so much easier and better for me. And on the one hand, I just told you that's true. Economic stability, more job opportunities, longevity in the workforce. But it's also true that sometimes it takes a while to find their way, and not every 18, 19, 20-year-old has a clear understanding of where they're going to be when they're my age.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, at least the talks in my house is it's not really negotiable with my kids. And I understand college is not for everyone, but I've also seen just an untold amount of statistics showing that the only group of people that have consistently grown their wages greater than inflation over the last 30, 40 years are college educated workers. And so I understand you don't have to go to college to be successful, but look, I'm not the entrepreneur that's going to be able to tell them how to do otherwise. And so I wonder sometimes are politicians and talking heads and news analysts trying so hard to prove a point, but they're sending their kids to college. So they're only trying to discourage other people's kids from going to college. And so I just wondered if some of that bleeds over into the classroom, that you have some students that have been, listening to certain podcasts for years telling them that college sucks, but then they're sitting there in college because their parents had them go.
I think that raises really a dichotomized view. And I think there's a lot of people who feel very privileged and empowered by coming into the college classroom. I think there are people who are not sure what they want to do with a college degree, know it's a lot of work. We're asking them to commit to something for 4 years of their life, and that is a long time in the life of an 18-year-old. And I think that there'll be some, I don't want to say resistance. I have not seen resistance, but I think that there's some questioning in terms of what is this getting me? Many of our college students these days are working. And so they're getting a paycheck. They're seeing how expensive housing is, and they're knowing that they can't afford housing, in today's world on most college students' paychecks. And so I think that there's some larger economic implications for them. But definitely, I don't shy away from any conversation. And I think that that's an important conversation to be had. For some people, there's an easy answer. For other people, it has to really be, critically applied thinking to what's best for me. And that's where I think that is coming into our consciousness at this point. For a long time, we've had this kind of automatic. Here's the next step. For if you're in this socioeconomic status, here's the next step. But what that's done is that's created barriers for people who aren't in that socioeconomic status to come and to attend and to be identified by their schools as being prospective, successful candidates for college. So having those conversations, I think, is important. But we also want to be sure we understand that here's the benefits, and you can't take those away. Right. You can't say that these don't exist in that conversation. You have to look at whether those do exist or not. One of my son's friends went to welding school, and that was a great opportunity for them. He got out sooner than my son. He was making good money sooner than my son. It was what he needed to do. But that doesn't mean that it's not still a good choice for somebody else to go to school.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail right on the head, because I almost feel like there's been such a reversal of public opinion that people now feel like they have to apologize when they say they want to send their kid to school. You know what I mean?
Yep. It's a privileged statement.
Yeah, because it's like they're so aware of it. But also, I think some of it is this idea of people don't want to sound out of touch or be accused of being an elitist. And so if someone says, well, of course I'm going to send my kid to college, they catch themselves and be like, well, my kid doesn't have to go to college, but I hope they do. But nobody needs to go to college. But like, there are tons of people that aren't going to send their kid to college, and they'll just say, no, college isn't worth it. But they don't worry about the judgment on the other side. So personally, I'm sending my kids to college, and I'm not going to apologize for it.
As you should not.
And I think more people just need to be able to accept maybe who they are. Like, yeah, everybody's not going to go to college, but some people are. That's okay.
That is okay. And that doesn't imply or mean anything about that person. It doesn't take away from somebody else, and it doesn't add to that person, right? It's what's their path or their journey, and it's what they need to do. And I think you're right that there's so many things right now that, are judged or evaluated in the social sector that makes us, feel like sometimes we do have to apologize for things that, no, this is okay. I've worked really hard to position my kid to be able to do this, right? My kids worked really hard to position themselves to be successful. We're going to celebrate that. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all about finding what you can, or doing what you can, I guess, to set your kid up to do the best for them. Actually, speaking of kids doing the best for them, I have to ask. So I just got a new iPhone this weekend,
Yeah.
and it tells me that I now have Apple AI. I am not that far into AI yet. I'm sure it'll become more of a thing, but in the legal world, we're still a little hesitant to get involved. Has AI just totally changed the way that kids go to college now?
AI has totally changed learning. Absolutely. It's changed writing. It might be a small minority, but I can tell you that AI can be used to strengthen writing. So if you take something that AI says and you tell somebody, you have to rewrite this in your own words, that allows them to see. And first of all, a prompt has to be driven by that person's language and what they're seeking, right? So you have to be able to articulate what the prompt would be. And then you're able to see a very kind of high level writing, sometimes for the most part, in an AI response. And then you ask that person to take this and now look at what your prompt was and look at what their response was and make this your response. What's needed? What's the gap? How can you say this in a way that reflects you as an individual? But honestly, it's getting harder to detect, and people are using it for everything. And so that is changing how we approach, authenticity and what somebody creates. What I would constantly think about is how would it be used in the real world, and how can we prepare our students for that type of use? And so ignoring it, hoping it goes away. I remember when ChatGPT was revealed and some of my faculty were like, la la la, I'm not gonna, acknowledge it exists. And then others were like, this is so cool, and what can we do? And so I think that, yes, unequivocally, it's changing how we learn, but it can be used to enrich learning experiences. It can also be used to avoid learning experiences. And that's what we have to balance. How can we continue to ensure that people aren't just defaulting to what ChatGPT says?
I have to be honest, I feel like you're one of the first people that I've heard speaking about, AI in education, that there could be a good part to it, right? Like, I feel like everybody else is always just like, it's when the people thought the printing press was going to put all the scribes out of business type thing. So I think I hear so much more about the negative sides that it is interesting to hear that you think there will be some benefits to education.
And I absolutely do think there will be benefits. And we have some faculty doing some amazing work. Maybe we could connect them with you. But in terms of using AI to help us with learning, in terms of helping the clients that we're seeking to improve health and well-being for, in terms of using AI and machine learning to help support clients, I mean, it's really incredible what the opportunities are. There's fear, there's caution. I liken it in some ways to whenever I was in grad school, I had to learn how to do a formula. Now you can just use a program for that, right? You can use a calculator to figure out a math problem in a way that you couldn't use 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And so I think that as we're evolving, as our knowledge and learning is evolving, if we're not looking at opportunities within that, I think that just means that students will remain far ahead of us and will remain far behind.
So I'm going to connect these two things together, I promise.
I gotcha.
I assume if there is a shortage in social workers, does that also mean there's a shortage in professors and teachers for social work?
That's a really interesting question. So we haven't seen that yet. Because social work is a professional degree, it's fairly common for us to have professional social workers as faculty and as instructors for our students. And we continue to have a really robust community of faculty and instructors for our students. I do think, as you had talked a little bit about the adversity related to state funding for programs, I do think that, we'll see a fallout from this in the next decade or so as we have fewer people getting PhDs, fewer people going to graduate school. Some of the federal level stuff will start limiting loans for graduate students. That's going to have an impact as well. So I don't see that at this moment in time, but I believe that we'll see that in the future.
You know what? Let's talk about it while we're talking about it. The adversity, the budget cuts, because I think for the average person that just follows the news, they keep seeing a lot about budget cuts. at the
Absolutely.
federal level and at the state level. So how are you seeing that impact IU?
So I think that, looking at the state level first, I think that when Governor Braun took office, I think that he made it very clear there would have to be cuts in the state budget. And I think we anticipated a number, and then some of the revenue projections didn't come in where they thought they would be. And so that number had to be adjusted. So obviously, higher education has experienced budget cuts as well as the rest of the state programming. I think that's really hard when you talk about cuts to Medicaid and knowing how important those services are for people who are needing Medicaid, how important the preventive services are, as well as treatment services are. And then you compare that to higher education, right? I think somebody would say that we need this cancer treatment in this child versus paying somebody to go, have higher education opportunities here. So it's really hard to equate those. So I think a uniform brush was applied in that all areas of state funding will receive cuts. How that has impacted IU, our administration has been incredibly resilient and resourceful. So we're really, because in Indiana there's a 2-year budget cycle, we're really seeing phase 1 and then phase 2. Our administration had committed to a raise for folks at IU and has maintained that commitment. So trying to find other areas or avenues in which we could adjust to those budget cuts, I think, were really important. The second phase of that is really about looking for efficiencies where possible. We want to say we're efficient already. We want to say there's no areas in which, we're not conscious of being good stewards of funding. But that being said, we're continuing to look for opportunities to streamline, to be efficient, to have when positions can be, used in a way to maybe we could combine supervision of these people because they're doing the same thing. We're looking for those opportunities in year 2. So we've got some time to do that, and we've got some good people who are very invested in being good stewards of the state funding.
So you just said something that was very interesting. You said that Braun came in wanting budget cuts, and then the projections came in low. So even before there was known to be less tax revenue, there was already a goal to cut spending in colleges specifically. What's your understanding of why?
So, and this might be an area in which you have a little bit more information than me. I'm relatively new to Indiana. I've been here about a year, so I came last summer. And so I just was aware that when he took office, he, was indicating to state agencies that they would have to be looking at budget cuts because of revenue projections, and then revenue projections were even lower. But in terms of I think that, having come from another state, I think that there is a tension here to trying to balance a budget in a time where there's incredibly high inflation. So the things that you used to, pay less for, you're paying more for now. If you just look at the state mileage reimbursement or the federal mileage reimbursement, there's things that are impacting our budgets and our revenues that, that we just didn't have a playbook for, right? How can we know how COVID would utterly destroy so many aspects of life for us and have health consequences beyond COVID, mental health consequences, educational consequences, and economic consequences? So we're still, I think, in that response period of we don't have the stability or the predictability. That's probably a better word, the predictability that maybe we've had and been able to have a luxury of in the past that we didn't even realize was a luxury.
So I can't tell you, haven't been in Indiana long term. I guess I was asking to see if you had been given like a educational reason, because I could tell you for the most part it's a culture war political thing. But those are my words, not the dean's. But with those budget cuts, the thing we all keep seeing about is IU having to close programs, having to get rid of degrees. Like, what is that actually that's happening?
So as part of the state appropriations bill, they actually kind of at the last minute added some criteria for low enrollment programs. I think that these were ongoing discussions with the state, with the Indiana Commission on Higher Education, but they'd never been codified into state law before. And so making them law has put a different sense of urgency. Some of the programs that were identified as low enrolling had already actually been identified. And whenever there's a program that has low enrollment is identified for closure or being suspended, what happens is you need a teacher teach-out plan. With the average undergraduate degree taking 4 years, a teach-out plan is typically 4 years. And so I think some of those things were already in progress. But by making it state law, I think it gave certainly a sense of urgency. Went into effect July 1st, right? So there were a lot of conversations that had to take place. So that is one aspect. I think a secondary aspect is really trying to understand. I don't know if you read the list. Well, first of all, my Indianapolis's programs, social work programs, were listed incorrectly, and that created quite a bit of stress for our constituents, for our students, for our alumni, for our faculty and staff in our school. So being able to correct that, by the time we got it updated, it's really nationally across social work realm slated for closing. But we're not, still here, still taking applications, and still looking forward to, supporting the next generation of social workers. But I think what has happened then is we've tried really hard to be able to support students with understanding what their career goals are, understanding their interest in those degree programs, and being able to have those degree programs available for current students. So business as usual for this coming year, because we've already accepted students into programs, but that teach out plan will start this coming year with an anticipated, some programs are maybe a 6-year program, some are 4. And so those teach out plans are unique to those programs.
Okay, so big headline there, though. The School of Social Work is not closing, correct?
Thank you. Absolutely correct. That is true.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So is it just low enrollment that's causing some courses to close? Is that the one metric they're looking at, or is there something else to it?
It really is. And in fact, the state bill prescribed exactly how many students you needed on average over a 3-year span. So it's not just last year's low enrollment or low graduate, they actually looked at graduation rates. So it prescribes the number of students. And I think that that's important for us to understand, that at the undergraduate level, for instance, is where we see a lot of our closures at not social work, requiring an average of 15 students in a program over the past 3 years. I think that it's really important for us to realize that so much of the college experience is done in community and is done in understanding that these, your student colleagues, your peers bring so many different lived experiences that you therefore are enriched just by, hearing their opportunities or seeing what they've been through or having their connections kind of laid out in front of you and you being able to share your connections as well. So 15 students in an undergraduate program in the past 3 years is what the criteria was set for the state. I think that, honestly, we see some degrees on that list that do have workforce implications. For instance, an early childhood education degree. We have to have safe and appropriate childcare in order for people to be in the workforce. So there are some degrees on that list that I think we, see as greater good, to quote Dean Barry from Bloomington School of Education. And then there's some degrees that maybe we understand the role and the importance, but students aren't maybe seeing a future or a career, that workforce development that has been so emphasized. When you talk about a degree in certain maybe humanities section, that they might not see a connection to a job for that, and so it might not be present in their mind. Because honestly, I don't think it's not just post-secondary education that's emphasizing the workforce. I really think that this emphasis has been in the secondary and high schools for years. And I think this is an outcome as we're producing those students are now entering college.
So it sounds to me like underlying these cuts to classes is the idea of almost moving college towards a system to create purely workers, to create workforce versus the citizen as a whole, the student as a whole, the person as a whole. I could tell you one of the most memorable classes I had. So I grew up in Martinsville. And I know you're new to the area, but for any of our listeners that know Indiana, Martinsville's got some very, very bad sundown history, right? So a very, very white area, very Christian area. I was not exposed to basically any person that was different than me, right? And I remember going to IU and in my first semester having, I think it was a sociology 101. And we would watch a movie and then discuss it, and just hearing what other students would say about it, not just the movie, but what the other students had to say, was one of the most mind-opening experience. And so much of the, people try to say, oh, you're getting indoctrinated at school. For me, it was just hearing somebody's point of view that was different from mine, different from my cousins, different from my family, because I hadn't been exposed to anything. And it sounds to me like these budget cuts are going to take away that exact type of exposure to other ideas and views that someone gains from college.
So I 1,000% agree with your estimation of what college can be. I might share a different perspective, though, on where college is morphing to. So in our general education courses, we are still requiring students to have that broad-based eclectic learning that comes from multiple disciplines. So I would never want a social work student just learning about social work, right? They
Right.
need to learn about economics. They need to learn about interpersonal interactions, right? There's so many components of a college degree. And I want to tell you that element has not changed. That element remains very strong for us. I think that's the fear of, is this the door opening or the door cracking to maybe some changes that will reflect a much more focused area for students. But I want you to know that, and across the state, not just IU, we continue to expect students to have those general educational components that will help enrich, will help shape perspectives, inform perspectives, not in a way that tells you what to think, but gives you opportunity to think for yourself, because now you've been exposed to more than you've been in your life. We're experiencing coming from a small rural community where a lot of people were just like you is very similar to many people going to college across Indiana. And it's our job. How you come to us, we love it. Welcome. Come on. But how you leave us, it should be that informed citizen who's ready for a global economy.
So I'd be remiss not to ask you about this while I have you. I was watching Fox News the other day, and I learned that every problem in the world is because of DEI. So I was very happy to see that Governor Braun came in and saved the world from DEI. How has the guidance and the state's orders on that, has that affected you personally or your program?
Well, I think it's caused a lot of distress. Honestly, I think that whenever we think about attacking DEI, it feels like we're attacking the people reflecting DEI for us. And so that's not our intention. That's not what we would support at all. It's not impacting our curriculum, remains the same for social work. There are ways in which social workers need to know about adversities. You need to know, we talked earlier about trauma and the impact on trauma and how the impact can be greater on some socioeconomic statuses, for instance. So we still need to train our social workers to look at outcomes and when there's gaps in outcomes for individuals. And often those gaps are related to aspects of identity, aspects of if somebody's from a rural environment versus an urban one. There's things that people can't control that impact health, for instance, right? Social determinants of health. So those are things that we continue to need our social workers to learn about. Those are things that our accreditation body continues to expect that we will help our students learn about. But moreover, there are things that impact every Hoosier in the state, every citizen of the state. And so there are things that it's important for students to learn about in order to be better prepared for their social work practice. I think that the pendulum is swung on DEI, and I imagine at some point we'll be a little bit maybe more centered in our approach for that. In the meantime, I can tell you that a lot of people are wondering what that means. A lot of people are feeling attacked, and that's not what we want people to feel supported in being who they are. I think that, if we had a robust debate where somebody might have another view, that might be different. But our goal is to prepare social work practitioners to have good outcomes for their clients. And in order to do that, it's important for us to talk about adversity that someone faces that impacts outcomes.
Does it get to a point with all the focus on it and the guidance that it's causing teachers to have to take that into account when they're thinking about what they can teach? Or is this at least a discussion among teachers and curriculum developers of, oh, we got to watch it when we're talking about this issue?
Well, yes, I think it does create some stress for folks, and it creates a sense of let's be accountable to our sources. So here's what I can tell you in terms, and here's where I found this, and here's what I can tell you is the impact. I think that that's not a bad thing. We should be accountable to our sources of knowledge and we should be able to help our students understand how perspectives are informed by that knowledge. But I think that that's also a detriment in that people are more maybe, and so those conversations are harder to have in group settings. And that's where we don't want to lose that enriching piece, of what you described, where I might have somebody who's totally, I'm shaking my head and I'm going, whew, but that's still important for me to hear, right? It's still important for me to have those experiences with people who see life so differently than any of my experiences may have been. So that's where we don't want to have to censor those kinds of conversations.
Well, especially since college is supposed to be like the beacon of free speech, that the idea that we're having to censor anything is kind of counterintuitive, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. We don't want to.
So, Dean Benner, let me wrap this up because I don't want to take too much more of your time. There's a lot that has been coming at colleges in the last couple of years, whether it's budget cuts, legislation, or now departments and classes being closed. I guess I would just ask you, what do you think the future of higher education looks like?
I think that the future of higher education remains bright. I think that we continue. Higher education continues to be a pathway to futures, to economic stability, to opportunities that are not present without higher education. I think we continue to have people who are committed to student learning, and I mean that in a holistic way. The traditional years students spend in college are incredibly formative, and we want to support students through those years. And I believe we're going to do that well. IU is unabashedly committed to the holistic student. And I think you'll see that in the resources that are available. I think that as we look at affordability, that has to be something that we consider too. Access equals affordability. We want to be able to ensure that whoever identifies college as the best part of their journey or the next part of their journey, we want to make sure they can make it here. And again, I think IU's done some really incredible pieces with that, with the direct admit programs that they're working with high schools on. But I also think that, that adversity, that if it's sustained may impact enrollment simply as a matter of somebody hearing more of the negative than the positives. We know that young adults or high schoolers are much more likely to listen to peers than you gave an example of a news station. But parents are impacted by those news stations, and it's an investment. College is an investment. And so that's where we want to continue be sure that people understand. College continues to be an investment that pays off in dividends, and to your earlier point, like no other investment that you can make.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear the optimism, especially as I'm about to send my oldest to IU Bloomington in the fall. But also, I have to say, you said something that's so important. Access and affordability are intertwined. And that's not just education. That's so many aspects of life. So very, very well said. Dean Kalea Benner, thank you for joining us. I enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the optimism. So thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Thank you.
On Trial with Josh Lowry.